And so there was like a lot of people were kind of woken up about the issue this year. And then you started seeing like puppet masters in the background. Got me a little bit attuned to it, especially because then there was those other three objects. And if you remember, the US Air Force in the span of like 3 days shoots down three random objects floating over American airspace.
Who would play you? Who would play you if there was a Netflix docu-film?
Dude, this is where
Because it's going to happen. I mean, I joke, but it will happen. This is a massive
here,
story.
because we're on my phone, this is where I suck and I'm a nerd. Like I read. This is my now hearing some whispers that opposition came from, because I think it could have been October, maybe November, but like just a month and a half, 2 months ago, Himes told me that no, he had not had a single conversation with the chair, Mike Turner, Ohio Republican. He told me not had a single conversation with him about the issue. And then you hear that that committee was the one, helping kill or gut this measure. Well, now my interest is piqued even more.
The following is my conversation with Matt Laslo. Matt is a veteran journalist, professor, and writer based on Capitol Hill. Matt is a wide contributor covering big tech, crypto, data privacy, and UFOs. Over the years, he's also been a regular contributor for Vice News Tonight, HBO, Rolling Stone, Raw Story, The Daily Beast, and many more. Matt has been one of the only reporters asking the difficult questions and covering the UAP subject from within Capitol Hill. So much so that he's interviewed 100 senators asking them about the UFO UAP subject. Matt is a unique and fascinating guy who was kind enough to give me some of his time and his thoughts on where we are today on the UAP subject. So, the following is my conversation with Matt Laslo. Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time, and I've been following you on I've been following you online on Twitter, on Ask a Poe, etc., etc. And you seem to be one of the only dudes, if not the only person down there covering the UAP subject. So I want to get onto a few of those bits in a short while. But first, I'm kind of interested in where your kind of interest, if at all, really, but where your interest in UFOs UAP came from. Where did that kind of start?
If you rewind to the beginning of 2023, America's airspace was invaded by a fucking Chinese spy balloon. And because I've covered Congress now 17 years, and like seeing all the senators huddle in the skiff, or they do classified briefings because our airspace was invaded by this balloon. We spend about $1 trillion a year on our military toys. And I'm like, wait, we got all these toys, all this graft to grift, like spending all this money on the military, and we can't track a fucking balloon. And so that like got me a little bit attuned to it, especially because then there was those other three objects. And if you remember, the US Air Force in the span of like 3 days shoots down three random objects floating over American airspace. And then they stop. They don't stop shooting down objects because there's not objects there. They stop because there's a public outcry. And so I'm like, what? What is all this? And then a couple months later, UFO whistleblower David Grush, boom, he drops his initial interview in the debrief. And this is where I'm a congressional junkie through and through. I'm a journalism professor on the side, and all my students, they want to work their way up and become White House reporters. Fuck that. I'm a congressional junkie. The founders of America gave Congress a unique spot above the White House. Sorry to bring it up, but yeah, we broke away from the UK because of the monarch. We didn't want, a ruler or whatever. we wanted 535 crazy rulers in Congress. But, over the decades, Congress has just ceded so much power to the executive branch, and like we're a nation of pop politics. So we all love the shiny object of the White House and the president and the presidency. But a lot of those trappings are only there because Congress has ceded its power to the executive. And so Grush, his first claim was, hey, America has recovered craft, So I'm like, all right, that can be verified, fascinating. But I'm like, hey, either the crafts exist or they don't. His second claim, that's the one that really woke up the congressional junkie in me, because his second claim is that there are these SAPs, or special access programs, that the government explicitly hides from Congress and that are not directly funded by Congress. They allocate the money, but through secret channels or whatever, it gets funneled that way. And so as a congressional junkie, I'm like, wait. He just said to each five of the 535 elected members of Congress, you are being lied to. You are being made a laughing stock by these unelected officials or the president or whatever. So I took that as free reign to go ask 100 United States senators about the claim that they're being lied to. Game on. Ball's now in their court. Except they suck at ball, so I got to keep reminding them.
Yeah, I mean, 100 interviews, and you put that out. Was that out on Ask a Poll?
Yeah, on our website, askapol.com. I actually, part of what I'm going to do ahead of the holidays or during the holidays is get out each one of the 100. I think I probably got out around 50 or whatever. But once I did everyone on the Intelligence Committee and everyone on the Armed Services Committee, everyone started getting really fucking depressed. And they were like, wait, so Senate doesn't really care about this? Because I'm like, yeah, any newsy interview I got out first. So I still got like 40 or 50 depressing interviews.
Nice.
Telling but depressing. And like, I need to put them in Excel form or whatever so people can see it. But the one thing that just strikes me is the lack of curiosity with these lawmakers. Because you have there's some people in the UFO camp who are like, no evidence will dislodge them. You have some people in the non-UFO camp, same way. No evidence will dislodge them. Like, if they are sitting there, like, being sucked into a spaceship, if an alien is right in front of them, they're going to be like, nope, that's not real. So whatever. Then you have like this large group in the middle that are just curious. And I think some of your folks or viewers might know the name Jamie Raskin. He's an American politician. He's the head of the House Oversight Committee, or he's the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. He was a part of that January 6th investigation, and then he led one of the impeachments against former President Donald Trump. And Raskin, after he was in Grush's public testimony in July, well, for one, he said he was there because he was alerted to it by so many of his constituents, and it kind of sounded like ones who had access to his ear. So I'm thinking like, oh, your donors, or some big donor cares about the issue, whatever. So he, like, leaving that hearing was like, oh, I want to, because if you remember half of what Grush said there in that public testimony, he's like, sorry, I can't talk about it here publicly. I can give you information on that, but it has to be in a classified setting or in a SCIF. So Raskin and all these other folks, even AOC, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she told me leaving that hearing that she still had more questions, especially she comes at it more from like the military industrial complex angle, the contracting side. And so there was like a lot of people were kind of woken up about the issue this year. And then you started seeing like puppet masters in the background. On the surface, they're like, oh, no, 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 there's nothing, there's no there. Well, then why are you like going out of your way to derail this investigation, which Congressman Tim Burchett, one of the top voices or heads of the Congressional UAP caucus, um, you could tell, like leading up to that oversight hearing, there was just more pressure exerted on him. Things would change at the end. The gavel was taken out of his hand and given to someone else. And then since then, what Congress just did here in the US, the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA. Well, Senate, you didn't really hear much from like the House Intelligence Committee there. They kind of laughed it all off. But then you hear that they're working in the background and really, gutted this already kind of lukewarm UAP measure. Um, you're like, wait, you guys, if you're like, whatever you're trying to do, the opposite's happening. Because now I'm just getting more intrigued.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is that it's from how I see it, and I'll accept that I'm not a legal expert and certainly not on how things work over in the
Hey,
States, but
neither are lawyers.
but if you've got some legislation that essentially says, look, if we've got information about non-human intelligence, biologics, etc., then it kind of has to be disclosed in some format via some reviewers. If there's nothing there, there's nothing in my mind. If there's nothing there, there's nothing to disclose. So it just seems very strange that there's this kind of pushback. So because it's almost so telling that if we're pushing back, then there's something there. And and I mean, do you get a sense that they'll push back anyway, even if there wasn't something there? Is this one of those things where they just don't like to have things change and legislation, even if there's nothing's going to come out of it? Would they still push back anyway because it's a change of the status quo?
It could be. I mean, because there are some people. Who is it? The head of America's Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate. This guy, Senator Risch from Idaho. What did he tell me at askapol.com? The headline was, I don't read UFO stories. So okay, that's the chair of this powerful committee that's outwardly focused on, America's relations with other nations. And we now have a UAP, the Arrow, this anomaly office, NASA, they started their own anomaly office. And they admit, hey, there's about 300 or so objects that flew over American airspace that we don't know what they are. And here you have Rich saying, I don't read UFO stories. Well, you don't do your fucking job, because I want to know what the fuck is invading our airspace. So you have this dereliction that does kind of stem from, the old school X Files, all that stuff. But people stuck there. I'm like, you guys are stuck in a bad joke. Like, that's not even the conversation being had here. For one, I still want to know, is China flying balloons over us right now? And what the hell were those other objects you shot down?
Oh. Yeah, because ultimately you've got, it's moved on from having this discussion about we need to know if there's aliens out there to actually we need to know if there's projects being run without government oversight, if there's tax money being spent without, without oversight, if there's a threat to our airspace or your airspace and aviation, etc. So they're big questions that are really nothing to do with what it could be, as in, extraterrestrial time travel, interdimensional, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if we're talking about projects here that are taking taxpayers' money, regardless of what they're making, whether they're making secret technology, whatever, that's still something that senators and congressmen should be paying attention to. Hang on a minute, this is our money. We were elected
Yeah.
to manage it.
And one thing I'm kind of finding here especially as the year is winding down. Like, yeah, there's the Congressional UAP caucus, Congressman Luna, Burchett, Burleson, all them. Like, and actually, some of them are just like hardened in their beliefs, you know. Um, they're obviously curious, but what I'm struck by is how many lawmakers just lack curiosity. For one, as you were saying, like they should be offended because you were just told you're being lied to. Like, hey, your wife's having a couple affairs. Like, everyone knows about it, but you're just not curious. Like, you're not a man or a lady, whatever, you know? And so that lack of curiosity in Congress is interesting to me because I'm like, especially when it comes to, we just dropped, I was about to soon in the next hour or so, I'll drop our exclusive with New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand at askapol.com. And then yesterday we dropped our exclusive with Senator Mike Rounds, Republican from South Dakota. He was the lead author with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on that UAP amendment. And the interesting thing about both Rounds and Gillibrand is, so in the US Senate, there's 100 senators, but only 6 of those senators sit on both the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee. In America, we love wars, we love dropping bombs on whoever. So like our Armed Services Committee is like one of the top spots. And if you go down an Intelligence Committee, that means, you know, you're likely in a represent a safe state or something like that. So you're a lifer. You know, they trust you. You're a part of the establishment. You're going to be there. So you're empowered. You know, given the secret clearance to like look at America's secrets. Those 2 senators. So there's only 6 senators of the 100 who are on both armed services and intelligence. Well, those 2 senators had their own UAP amendment gutted, and they still don't know who did it. And Gillibrand, she's from New York. Schumer's also from New York. Like, that's your home state. Like, that is your ally on so many issues. And you don't know who gutted your amendment. And so, yeah, whatever's happening, I'm just getting more questions and more questions and more questions, especially when it comes to the House intelligence folks who publicly say, no, I'm not even, laugh it off, like, oh, I'm not even going to discuss it. And then you hear they're working in the background to gut it. I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's a real puzzle, and I think you know, I would hope that we kind of get to perhaps in a Netflix documentary at some point in the not too distant future. It'll be a fascinating one. It's what I find unusual. I mean, I see you as kind of like a Michael Keaton sort of dude, sort of running around in Congress with your notepad and pen, sort of old school, very nostalgic. I love it. I love it. But why do
Come
you
on,
think
Hunter
that?
S. Thompson. Oh, Gonzo. I guess I have to earn that a little more.
Why do you think that? Why do you think not many others seem to be covering it? Because we see, I think is it News Nation? I think News Nation are pumping quite a bit out to do with
Yep.
this, and I've seen one of their reporters and in yourself when I think it was the last skiff with Pachet and Luna and Burleson and
Yep.
Moskowitz, I think, and perhaps a few others. But why is there? I would think that something like this, something that is so significant, certainly to the media, I would hope to the media in America, there would be more people at that kind of press conference outside with the cameras talking, you know, wanting to ask questions. And I think I panned around. I think perhaps it was yourself that had a recording. I might have seen yours, and it was you and News
Yeah.
Nation, and I'm thinking, what the hell? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Do you get any sense of why?
Well, it's interesting because when they had the David Grush, when he gave his public testimony in July, boom,
Yeah.
thousands. It seemed like thousands of reporters. You know, there was hundreds. We had a seat. My bureau, we had a seat. But you had to reserve seats. You usually don't have to do that. You know, usually most hearings are boring, but like that line for it looped all the way around one hall, all the way down another, all the way down another. And that's a huge building. And I'm like, whoa, I've been covering Congress 17 years. So I'm like, we didn't even have this many people come out for the Major League Baseball players for the steroid scandal. And like, there was like the paparazziification of the Hill then. And so you get them, there's this curiosity from the mainstream media that kind of stops at a certain point. And I'm a contributor at Wired magazine. I did one piece for them on it, and all these other publications had already gotten their stuff out. So I had to like do a different angle. So I put the issue within the conspiracy or this conspiratorial Congress, because you have all these anti-vaxxers, former congressman, one who just left, he wrote a book on Bigfoot. Like, yeah, this is a conspiracy Congress. And so putting the issue within that context is when I heard from the UAP UFO community. And that's where I was struck, because like I've been retweeted by AOC or retweeted by Matt Gaetz, and usually you don't gain like a solid 1,000 or 2,000 followers. But after that article, I did. And initially people were pissed off. They're like, oh, you're a snarky asshole, dot, dot, dot. I was like, no, look, separate yourself from the issue. Like, this is true about this Congress issue separately. And some person, I think was a professor, he totally stripped out all the beautiful words I had written. And he was like, do you guys see what this piece is? This is like 8 different senators talking about the issue. He's like, we never get that. And I was like, oh? And so all that to say, mainstream media, our editors, they'll take a little bit, but what we tend to do is to fall into the same groupthink as the politicians or whatever that we cover. I've covered drug policy for a long time, Playboy contributor, Rolling Stone, Vice, and Vice News Tonight. And you kind of find, like, what? On CNN, I was watching Jake Tapper with Dr. Sanjay Gupta talking about, oh, this fentanyl and drugs. And Jake Tapper goes, yeah, you can't even mess around with this fentanyl stuff. I just tell my kids, you can't even touch it. They just don't do it. And I'm like, you fucking moron. So you're going back to the failed war on drugs. Just say no. As 100,000 Americans are dying and ODing, like, maybe try something new. Like, for one, give everyone naloxone or Narcan. We should all have it. I always have it on me. But for two, there are drug testing strips. Because, Jake, when you tell your kids not to do that drug, if they're like me, they're going to do 10 times that amount of that drug. And so that same kind of, we just fall into this groupthink of our subjects. Part of it's to maintain those relationships, because like some lawmakers have probably laughed me off for the UFO beat. Well, fuck, Rubio, he laughed me off. He would always be like, oh, you're going to ask me about pot? I'm like, yes, I'm going to ask you about pot, because it's legal for me to smoke and grow it here, even as my black neighbors are in jail for it. So yeah, it's uncomfortable. So please fucking talk about pot. And it's not just pot, it's fucking medicine for many people, etc. And so I'm happy to dislodge lawmakers from their, BS, little ivory castles. But so you see with these big newsrooms, they're trying to like toe this interesting line of maintaining their credibility, but living in like this 1970s universe. And I'm like, maybe your viewers are like in their 60s and 70s, but if you want a younger audience, like, hey, maybe read some shit that isn't the Washington Post and New York Times.
Yeah, and it seems to be. I mean, I think Tim Burchett made a comment about this, that he'd put a comment out about something on Twitter and only had a fairly small response, and put something out about the UAP subject and got a massive response to it. And you
Yep.
kind of think that they would look at that. And I know that sort of self promotion is quite an important thing for a lot of these people, and being re-elected, that sort of thing. But you'd think that they would see that this is such, from a public perspective, such a big subject. And I mean, maybe
Yeah.
that's just my algorithms kind of set that way because what I'm in. But it does seem like this is a much larger issue than it was a year ago, and it's just growing and growing. Surely that
Well,
benefit them.
well, and if you look at polls, it's about, I had to like triple check it because I'm like, what? 70% of Americans don't agree that the grass is green. And it's roughly just under 70% of Americans. And it's interesting because they're kind of settled on it. They're like, yeah, of course there's extraterrestrial life. But then Americans do kind of go, after that. But within that, so it's like, for one, on one level, America's moved past the debate. Um, but then you have those devotees and like the energy of the people who are really into this issue. Um, it's something to marvel at. And I think some lawmakers, because at least there's one person in the community who gets a little thready. And so, because what? NASA, when they announced their UAP office, the fucking fools, they were like, all right, but we're not. So we're going to have a new UAP office. We're just going to keep its director secret from the public. Like, what? How did that even happen? Who said that was a good idea? Like, we're going to keep secret the person looking into divulging America's secrets. And, they had to walk that back instantly. But so it's also interesting electorally. You saw in the first Republican debate of this America's GOP Republican presidential primary, the Fox News host, she asked one question on this subject, and she allowed the folks on stage to kind of laugh it off. Well, when I talked to and Chris Christie got the question, I think I did a piece the next day being like, you should have asked Tim Scott. He's a senator. Oh, and he used to be a House member. Oh, some of his friends are leading these investigations, and he's really curious about it. So it's on his radar. It's not something he would laugh off. And so that's where I was looking at all the other debates, never came up again. And so now people are like, oh, and other newsrooms will be like, oh, yeah, that issue gets laughed off. No, 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 no. The question was framed in a shitty way. Chrissy was able to dismiss it. And I'm pretty sure Christie then did hear from the UFO community, and then he had to like walk it back. And so the Washington establishment gets paid to be stuck in the past a little bit. So they think, and all of our consultants and all of that, they're just timid on some things. And this is one of them. It's curious because it hasn't really come up in our campaigns, and even members of the UAP caucus, I've asked them, like, hey, is this going to come up in election 2024? Most of them say unlikely. I think if it comes up at the presidential level, then that could trickle down to the other races. Because who was it? Oh, yeah, Hillary Clinton in 2016. See, forget all the other stuff. This is the shame of why she did not become pres, because she promised to kind of open up Roswell and open up this stuff. And that makes me wonder, well, if she knows and cares about the issue, like, was she able to see some of this stuff when she was first lady? So I'm curious. Yeah, and I don't get access to Joe Biden these days, but I'm curious if it if it gets to that level. And it's just, if they're just curious, like hell, I wouldn't want to be a politician, but the only part of me that would want to be a politician is to know the secrets. Like that's the fun. And they're failing at even that.
Yeah. Do you get any kind of a sense of I mean, I know it's sort of speculative, but if anyone would know, it would be you, I would think. If anyone would have a good idea of what what is going on, what the UAP is or UAP kind of represents, I guess, you'd be one of the closest people to the people that would know, or to the people that would know who to ask, I guess. Do you get any kind of a sense of what this is, of what the UAP kind of represent?
Yeah. So I'm kind of, through interviewing well over 100 members of Congress, and then the ones I keep going back to, especially on the intelligence committees, it's starting to, I think most American politicians come at the issue, UAP caucus aside, I think most American politicians come at the issue from, our pilots are seeing this shit that we don't know. It is that the Chinese, is that Russian technology. So while they might not go to extraterrestrial, they're like, oh shit, do our adversaries have these capabilities? Which maybe the adversaries have the capabilities that they got off found craft or whatever. And so some take it that extra step. Most don't seem to. But the ones who I keep bringing it up with, like Senator Rounds, well, because that's even where I'm curious. Because, and I pressed Gillibrand, Senator Gillibrand, on this yesterday, which the interview I'm about to drop at askapol.com, because I was like, hey, Senator, it feels like there's just less energy, less interest in this issue now. And she was like, why do you say that? Part of me wanted to be like, do you realize how big of a dud this fucking interview is? Like, you know nothing about this subject. Like, I'd get more information out of a fucking like 5-year-old. But I played it safe and just said that. But so I'm curious, like you kind of get the sense from, and the way Marco Rubio, the way the Republican vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, look back at what he was saying in the spring and then June, July, what he was saying about Grush and his claims was, he took it personally. Like, hey, are we being lied to or aren't we? Or disprove this guy, or what the fuck, let's look at this shit. And so since then, I've been curious if they had a classified briefing or something, and all these lawmakers who got publicly hot and heavy over the issue were told, like, hey, y'all, stop talking about our secret shit because we're developing some stuff and we don't want the Chinese to know about it. And we might have given the contract to Lockheed Martin, so we're not really in control of it here in the government, but it's okay, it's cool, we got it, go about your business as usual, let your amendment be gutted. I'm like, that's your baby, that's your amendment. Like, you should care about it. It's got your name on it. And they just had it gutted in front of their eyes. Or no, they had it gutted in secret. And then they come out in public and they're like, look at my baby. We're all like, ew, it's fucking hideous. Like, don't show that to anyone.
But you'd think that this would have been, I mean, you assume that, Schumer and Rounds, etc., would have run this past maybe the executives, say, well, we're going to put this forward. is this going to be okay, or before it's even brought forward? Because then it does look like they've failed if it's gutted. You think they would have done that kind of in the early stages? So you kind of have that assumption. I mean, I do anyway. Have that assumption that
Oh, they're
you
there.
know.
They're there. Don't. No, no, no. See, the problem with the UAP community, you all assume lawmakers are smart. They actually read. Like, no, no, no. They spend 75% of their time fundraising. And so this issue has been pretty fascinating from that, because sometimes you just see like the blatant ineptitude. Yeah, like NASA saying, hey, we're going to investigate all these secrets that you're concerned about. We're just going to do it with a secret leader. Like, what universe do you guys live on? And that's where the NDAA debate became interesting, because, and I'm still, along with Schumer's UAP co-authors, I'm still sniffing out where the opposition came from. Because when I talked to the top Democrat, or the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, Jim Himes from Connecticut, who I know well from covering him for his local NPR station, local public radio station, Himes is like dismissive to like laughing it off. He's like, oh, he's bringing up little green men and ha ha ha. Like, why are we talking about little green men? And I'm like, you're the only one fucking talking about little green men, dude. They might be purple, bro. But so he just laughs it off. And I'm like, well, you're laughing off a conversation I'm not having. But I'm like, now hearing some whispers that opposition came from, because I think it could have been October, maybe November, but like just a month and a half, 2 months ago, Himes told me that no, he had not had a single conversation with the chair, Mike Turner, Ohio Republican. He told me not had a single conversation with him about the issue. And then you hear that that committee was the one, helping kill or gut this measure. Well, now my interest is piqued even more, especially if you fucking lied to me.
I think we are very, and I'm sure I don't often speak for the UFO community, but I think I will here. We're very fortunate to have you in there asking the questions and digging around.
Wait till you get to know me.
I've got
just like my ex-wife, you'll regret it.
I'm conscious that I've taken up a lot of your time. I did have one last question. It's a bit of a jovial question,
Yes,
really,
sir.
but I'm adamant that there will be some Netflix documentary about this, and you will be featured quite heavily in that from from the inside, poking at people inside. Who would play you? Who would play you if there was a Netflix docu-film?
Dude, this is where,
because it's going to happen. I mean, I joke, but it will happen. This is a massive story.
because we're on my phone, this is where I suck and I'm a nerd. Like, I read. This is my if you ask me about an American president, so I've read a biography on every US president. If you ask me about a president, boom, I know that stuff. I don't know the people in Hollywood. Like, they haven't done enough to earn my memory. And I've smoked a lot of cannabis in my life, so I saved my brain cells for politics, not for Hollywood. what little bit I got left.
Well, we'll have to think about that one, and we'll have to have a think. But it's definitely coming. It's definitely coming. I can see it, and I can see you featured.
He's older now, but I studied philosophy in the undergrad, and one of my philosophy profs, he always called me Harrison Ford. In fact, he never called me by my name, and he's older. Every class, he'd be like, "You look like Harrison Ford," and I'm like, "Yeah, you say that at the start of every fucking class," and I get red in the face at the start of every class.
Okay, Matt. Well, look, it's been a real pleasure. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully you'll keep on digging, and we'll get a bit more. And I'll certainly be keeping an eye out and watching our sort of. I'm sure
what part of the island are you on?
I'm in the Midlands, so I'm in Lincolnshire, which is kind of the
Nice.
yeah, just the Midlands really, right in the middle. Lots of green, not many shops, lots of
I
sheep.
lived, I spent a little shy of a year in Newcastle.
Oh yeah,
I was on the north side of the Tyne with the Geordies.
yeah, that's a strong accent.
Yeah, I was there helping refit a hospital ship, my group Mercy ships. But I loved it. It was during a World Cup, maybe 2001.
Wow.
So you're working on the ship, like service or whatever. So like you're there just to work, and they'd be like, "All right, England's playing, no one's working," and then
Off to the
they,
pub.
yeah, and then they'd be like, "All right, America's playing, we're all working, but you have to go to a pub." I'm like, all right, love your
Nice.
country.
Take care of yourself, man. Thanks very much, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, let me know, man. Anytime. This is fun.
Will do.